Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Take Two Radio. I'm Pam, your host, and tonight I have with me my lovely co-host, Dawn. Dawn, how are you doing tonight?
I'm great. How are you, Pam?
Very excited, like I always am, but even more so for tonight's guest. How about you?
Oh, definitely. It's been looking forward to it all day.
I guess we'll go ahead and bring him on because everybody's been waiting with anticipation. So we want to welcome Vincent Irizarry. How are you doing today, Vincent?
I'm very well, thank you, ladies. It's nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I should have said Daytime Emmy winner.
Yeah.
I was remiss on that, so naughty
That's
me.
True. I almost hung up, since you didn't give me that moniker.
Yeah, and we couldn't call you back either.
That's true. There's a reason for that, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody should have an escape route plan.
I know, right?
I know.
Yeah.
But you'll never have to worry about that. We'll never ever tell anybody, even if you did want to share. So.
Okay.
That's right.
So what did you do today?
Today, actually, I had an appointment today. It was for a commercial audition that I had in Santa Monica, and it was a beautiful day here in Los Angeles. So I went there and did that. And, and had lunch there in Santa Monica, and then came back just in time to call you ladies, literally about 10 minutes before I called you. So I was getting a little concerned when I was hitting these pockets of traffic. I'm like, oh, my gosh. There's like a blog radio show that I'm about to do, and I might not be there. That would have been fun. So, but I made it in time, thankfully.
Well, we're grateful for that. I noticed that you've done a few fan events recently, and the most recent one was in this month, just, a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And you met up with a lot of your previous co-stars. How was that event?
Well, actually, I did two events in within a week period.
Two in a week.
The first one we did. First one was my show that I produced, Fall in Love Again with Your Favorite Soap Stars. It's a cabaret-style show.
Yes.
With live music. And we did it. It was me, Walt Lilly, and Bobby Eakes. It was supposed to be Jacob Young as well, but because of Sandy, the hurricane, he rightfully decided not to come because he was worried about getting stranded in New York. And he was supposed to work on Bold and Beautiful that week. That would have been a disaster for him. So we completely understood, and he was right because he would have been stranded. Everybody's flights that were booked for the next day after the show were canceled. So he would have been stuck there till at least Wednesday, possibly even Thursday. That's what happened to everybody. So that it was the right decision for me. But we had a great time. It just the timing of it was bad. We were going to have a really great house, and that morning I woke up with Walt Willing calling me up on my hotel room number saying, you better wake up, man. We don't know if there's even going to be a show tonight. They're calling it a state of emergency already, and they're threatening about closing the bridges and tunnels and shutting down the subways and everything before the show. I'm like, are you kidding? I'm like, oh my gosh. So but we did. They kept the show. The show did go on, and it was too bad because even when I was looking at the weather at the time, it was strange to me because I was seeing where the weather pattern was, and it was down in Virginia, and I thought, well, there's no way it's going to get all the way up to us by the time of the show. And I didn't understand why they were being so alarmist at that time that they needed to shut down everything by 7 o'clock and the whole thing. And which was absolutely true. We finished the show. We did do it, and we had like 50 people in the audience that were able to make it. I completely understood why people didn't come in because they were everything that they were hearing. But I walked out of B.B. King's at midnight, and there was not even a drop of rain. It was a beautiful night. I decided to leave.
It's always the calm before the storm, right?
Yeah, but it didn't really even start until just started raining around 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And they shut down the subways and the buses at like 7 o'clock. And even people in Manhattan weren't able to make it. If they lived 2 miles away, they were afraid that they would get stranded. So it was tough. But we had a great show. It really was a lot of fun. And one of her nephew came and sang also. He was surprised the audience with him. He was a young guy who sings operatic, light classical. And
really?
Yeah, he sang, what song he sang? What's his name? Bocelli song with that Celine Dion did with him. Not Celine Dion. Yeah, Celine Dion. So it was nice. It was very nice. He came and sang, and I had some other kids that were supposed to come and perform, and they weren't able to get in from New Jersey, which is a shame because I really would have loved to introduce them. They're amazing performers. But we had a great time. And then the weekend after, we did New Orleans, and it was nice to see Bobby and Walt there again. We all survived that one, but we were all a little exhausted from the whole week.
I'm sure.
And also got to see Daniel Goddard and a few other people as well, Eric Marstoff, which I really have met him, I think, briefly in the past, but it was the first time that we got to hang out and talk. And it was nice. Everybody was great. It was great to see everybody.
Now, what do you miss the most about doing a soap? Or do you miss it? I know we miss you guys.
Well, I think anybody probably would. I love having this steady work and developing a character from week to week, month to month, year to year.
Right.
I've been very fortunate with the characters that I've had the opportunity to play over the years, and starting with Lou Jack. Lou Jack was an amazing character on Guiding Light back in the mid '80s, and loved playing that character and watching how the character developed. Scott Clark was a good character. It was okay. It wasn't my favorite of the ones on Santa Barbara, even though I loved being on the show. And I had some stories that were good. It's just that they couldn't seem to get consistent flow with the character out in writing. And any actor is really at the mercy of what they decide to write for you. You can only do so much. And that was one of those instances where they just didn't seem to know how to commit to the character one way or the other. But then I was fortunate enough to be given a 3-month job on All My Children with David Hayward, and everybody could see the real potential in the character, and they decided to develop him, and I loved it.
So that was short term when you started?
Oh, yeah, it was only supposed to be a 3-month gig. I was still living in L.A., and I just went there for 3 months to do the show, and before the end of the 3 months, they offered me a long-term contract.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, and there's a bigger story to that, actually, that Judy Wilson, who I adore, and she's now casting over at The-Young-and-the-restless. She, when they first came to me and offered me the 3-month job, I was living in L.A. I had just moved there about a year and a half before, maybe a year, actually, before. And I moved there because of my oldest daughter, Sienna, was living in Los Angeles at the time, and I was in Guiding Light for like 5 years, and she and I were flying back and forth every month to each other to be able to see each other. And when my contract was over on Guiding Light, I was really happy to get to L.A. so I could live by her, and I lived 3 blocks away from her, so I saw her constantly, and she was with me all the time, and was able to actively be involved in her school with her, to be there with her, and meet her, to take her to school, bring her home from school, and be a part of her life more. And it was wonderful. And when I first got this job on All My Children, I told her that that I was going to New York, and she was kind of in a panic. To her, she equated New York with like separation anxiety. And I promised her. I said, I promise this is a short term. It's 3 months. It's not going to be long, and I'm going to be back. And in that 3 months, you can come. We could spend time in New York. She loves New York. It's just tough. So I said, we'll be done. When I'm done, it'll be over. And then they came to me before the end of the 3 months, and they offered me a long-term contract. And here I was. I had a newborn baby with my daughter Aria, and it was kind of a slow year before that. And they were offering me this, and it was really tough. Offering me a good contract, and I bandied about for about a week with my agents and with the producer at the time, which was Francesca James and Judy Wilson casting. And after a week of it, I finally walked into Francesca James's office with Judy, and I said, I can't take the job. I have to turn it down. And they're like, why? And I said, I promised my daughter. I'm not going to go back on my promise. I told her this wasn't going to be long term, and I made her that promise, and I'm going to honor it. And everybody was surprised. My agents were surprised, and here I was going back to L.A. without a job, and as I said, with a newborn baby, and I'm pray that something happens and I do get a job in L.A. So I did. I went back to L.A. and I told my daughter, I said, I just want you to know that this happened, and I want you to know because I promised you that I wanted to keep that promise. But I also told her, I said, I can't make that promise always. My business is such that I could get a job that I'm going to be working in Miami for 5 years, or in Chicago, or in Hawaii, or in Vancouver. That's the way it is. I said, but I did make that promise to you, and that was important for me to keep that with you. And so she was very understanding of it and appreciative of it, but I thought it was important for her to know that. And it was 5 months later that Judy Wilson called me, and she said, what can we do to get you on the show? We really would like to have that character on. We'd like to have you on the show. And I said, I can't think of anything. I mean, my daughter's living here. And she said, what about Sydney? Her mother was my ex-wife. She was somebody who worked on Santa Barbara years ago, and she was on the-young-and-the-restless for a few years. They said, would she be willing to come to New York if a show was available for her to do here? And I said, I don't know. I don't know if she's not working right now. She might be. And I talked to her, and she said, yeah, absolutely. And Judy called the other shows. To her credit, it's like an amazing thing. She called the other daytime shows and let them know that Signe was available if any role came up. And what happened was that there was a role that was available at that time. They were casting on Guiding Light a person to come in that was supposed to be Annie, or you didn't know if it was supposed to be Annie, the character was there. Cynthia Watchworth, I think, was the one who played it before. And they put her on tape in L.A. They liked her audition, so they flew her to New York to test, and she got the part.
How awesome is that?
Oh, my.
So all my children, I signed with all my children. I moved to New York. A month later, my daughter moved to New York, and she's still in New Jersey to this day because of that. She's 22 years old now, and she at the time was like, I don't know, maybe she was like, I don't know, it was 1997, so she was probably like 7 years old, 8 years old when that happened, I guess. So it's pretty amazing. I feel like, thanks to Judy Wilson, that was very creative of her to do that and make it work, and that everything fell into place. And I just felt like, since I honored my promise with my daughter, I felt like, almost like God knows heaven and earth to make this happen. And
it was almost like
really
fate and a reward.
It was amazing that all these things came into play, and 13, 14 years later, I was still on the show, so anyway, but, back to your question. You asked me how was it? It's interesting, because that was a deviated metaphor from that.
No, I'm glad you shared that with us.
Oh, that's a great story.
I love that story,
Yeah, it's a wonderful story. I love it. And this is another thing with Judy Wilson. This is really funny. Judy, when I did that stint for 3 months, okay, and then I turned down the contract after that, it was the next week they were doing the Soap Opera Digest Awards in L.A., and I wasn't on the show anymore, and they invited me. They said, well, you're here. Why don't you come to the awards? So I went to the awards, and I sat right next to Judy Wilson. And we're watching the awards, and the category came up, and it said it was for Best Villain. And the person won, and they were on there, and Judy leans over to me. She goes, next year, that's going to be you. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I said, what are you talking about? I'm not even on the show anymore. She goes, next year, that's going to be you. I came back on the show 5 months later. A year later, for that award, I won that award. And that was Judy Wilson that predicted that. I'm like, are you kidding me? Oh, my God. It was like, do you have any stock tips or what? It was crazy. But anyway, like I said, back to the question, what do I miss the most? I loved having the steady work and developing a character. I love the characters that I've had the opportunity to create on these shows. And I love also the ensemble feeling. You really do. You get a sense that pretty much all of Daytime is like one big repertory company. And it's exciting. You get to work with wonderful, wonderful actors. You get to work with crews that you become like family. Everybody becomes family with one another. And, so I'm very grateful for all the years that I've had in Daytime and especially the fans. I mean, the fans have been amazing and so supportive to all of us for all these years. And, they can't express their gratitude, appreciation for this medium and for the actors that are in it more. It's impossible. And I think that they're really one of a kind. So I'm grateful for all of them.
And, that's so true. We really, honestly can't thank you enough for being part of our